Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for joining me today as I continue the weekly discussions based on the book, The Integral Human Being. As you know, the psychological series or psychology collection is a 16-book series written by the spiritual author Joanna de Angelis in close collaboration with Divaldo Pereira Franco. Joanna de Angelis is really brought so much to us when she created this bridge between spiritism and depth psychology. And we'll discuss some of the issues that she brings about week over week, chapter by chapter, book by book. And she also offers some interesting therapies or what I call solutions to those issues. If we consider how vulnerable we are, this is a moment that humanity as a whole is undergoing a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. And this little book, I always refer as little because it's quite thin, a series of books. They are such a gift, and it will present us some root causes, some ways to dealing with those causes of many of our psychological issues. Our focus of the study is to bring weekly topics found in the book, and basically, the ultimate goal is to ask ourselves, how do I ensure I have balance, stability, and emotional maturity despite of what's going on around me? But let's go ahead and get started. As you can see in the screen, the book is divided in 9 parts, and those parts create are divided yet into 40 chapters. So we are at the closing end of the book. Today's topic is this one about disturbing relationship, and it's the third chapter in the seventh part of the book, which is called Achieving Inner Plenitude. Um, we we understand from the varied parts and subparts as chapter that Joanna de Angelis bring many, many different topics. And you may think, well, do I need to read the whole book? No, you don't. But rest assured that Joanna is very intentional, and she creates this crescendo, if you will, where she adds a new layer to the overall theme of the integrity or the integral human being. And I want to invite you all to explore with me the themes that Joanna de Angelis brings up from those two lenses, spiritism and depth psychology. Let's go ahead and get started because we're going to talk a little bit about neurosis or neurotic behavior. And Joanna de Angelis is now in the 29th chapter, and she continues the discussions by addressing the aspects of relationships between a couple or between two people. And she brings those behaviors because within that relationship, we often find that are behaviors that in their essence are neurotic. So I said, okay, Joanna, well, what do we mean by that? So for you, for me, let's break down the concept. What does neurotic even mean, neurotic behavior? And the term neurotic describes a person who has neurosis. Okay, Marcia, very, very funny. Now let's just talk a little bit further. A person who presents those neurotic behaviors, neurotic acts, they feel anxious. So anxiety is one of the main components. They commonly feel negative about themselves. They have many feelings of self-doubt. For example, let's say if someone is neurotic, he or she will commonly go back to rehashing the worst case scenarios in their minds without being able to even control the pattern. Let me change how I see this problem, for example. They just go boom into the deep end of what is the worst case scenarios. But why? Right? Why do they do this? What is the root of me being neurotic? And the main component for all of us to understand is that there is not one cause of neuroticism. As a personality trait, um, it is influenced by many different things. For example, my genetics or my family history and environmental and social factors that contribute to our neuroticism. I always laugh when I remember somebody says, I want you to say, are you neurotic? Right? And the audience, this was a very famous speaker, and there was quite large audience. And he said, who here believes you are not neurotic? And there were several people that were like, okay, I'm not. And then he said, well, if you're not a neurotic, you're probably a psychotic or a sociopath. So, of those three traits of personality that commonly uh, is attributed to the majority of humanity, neurosis is quite common. We all have a little bit of fear, have a little bit of anxiety, and those rehashing worst case scenarios comes to a lot of us. But anyways, let's talk about neurotic relationships, right? The disturbing relationships. In if you were to summarize the what neurotic disorder refers to, it's used to describe multiple conditions. So, anxiety, depression, and neurosis. So, three that are closely linked. And as such, they impact a person's mental health and well being, but they don't lose touch with reality. So it is that inner turmoil that most of us have. I don't lose touch of reality. I am a functioning adult, for example, but in my inner world, there things may not be as easy as it seems. And the question that I come to my mind when I speak of that is that, well, how, if they don't really provoke you to lose touch with reality, how do neurotic behaviors impact specifically a relationship? Because that's what we're talking about today from this chapter in Joanna de Angelis, The Integral Human Being. Well, the insecurity in one or both parties, remember it's fear based, right? The insecurity between one or both parties leads to suspicions, leads to jealousy, and it may mark the relationship with aggression, dissatisfaction, irritability, control. I would like to quote Joanna de Angelis when she says individuals of a neurotic behavior are incapable of maintaining a stable relationship. So now she's saying that, all right, we're talking about different aspects of relationships with a neurotic, both parties or one of the two. And they said, if you're plagued with neurosis, you are most likely incapable of maintaining long term and stable relationship because their actual psychological constitution makes those relationships disturbing, and they demonstrate obsessive affection or insecurity, suspicion, and jealousy, right? So, as a byproduct, when we are indeed plagued by our own neurosis, think about it, we believe we don't deserve the love of the other. And if we happen to be able in a relationship, right, we then have this bizarre assumption that to flip that into assuming that if I don't deserve, you don't deserve my affection either. And that's when Joanna brings that idea that it's very difficult for us to maintain long-term a relationship because of that fear that feels certain beliefs that either I'm not deserving or you're not deserving of affection. So most likely the end result of this type of relationship is betrayal, rejection, abandonment, and those things occur at the very first opportunity that is presented. If we're able to hold on to the relationship, in I have my own neurosis, right? There's a high risk we become attached to the other person, and our relationship now is one that can be characterized by super self centered or even castrating needs. And we start to demand the sense of exclusivity, right? You, my partner, cannot have any other relationship with anything else. And by the way, I am a very self centered or egocentric, selfish person. You must cater to me to be able to stay in that relationship. And that's why Joanna de Angelis thinks that this is quite an important aspect for us to talk about, to think about it, to see what can we do. Well, the flip side is love, right? It's a truly flip the coin. And when we look at it, and I'm going to read what I put in the screen for all of us, Joanna says, love is the powerhouse that maintains the emotional equipment functioning harmoniously and is an acquisition of the mature, psychologically balanced spirit. I love that. Thank you, Joanna. And I just ask your permission to just break down a little bit about the types of love, right? We are human beings. We are imperfect beings thus far in this road to be better until we reach perfection. And with that, we also express those types of imperfections with the types of love. If we go into actually ancient Greek philosophy, because it's different, right? We're talking about 2,000 plus years that it separates us from ancient philosophy. But it's really interesting for us to break down the forms of love and how they perhaps may be different tone from the modern love. And they are, and I'm going to butcher the Greek, sorry, but they're called agape, eros, philia, philautia, and storge and xenia, right? So, real quickly, very uh, short summary of what they are is agape just means love, mostly of unconditional nature, and that type of love is found when we start to do acts of charity, the love of God for person and for what we call the other as a creature of God, right? And the term agape, which is I love it, beautifully used when in ancient texts, for example, they denoted unconditional love. And Thomas Aquinas actually explains to as to will the good in another. The second type of love is also an interesting one because of the contrasting definition in how many of us actually understand. But eros means love, mostly of the sexual passion. If you think about it, the modern Greek word just means intimate love. But if we go back to Plato, yes, Plato, he gives us this beautiful definition because he says the following: although Eros initially felt for a person that passion, with contemplation, it becomes an appreciation of the beauty within that person. Isn't it interesting? Right? Or anything that transcends the particular elements between that relationship to become this appreciation of beauty itself. So when we talk about it, you start to look at the idea of Platonic love to mean what started with love that has intrinsic in it that sexual passion, it becomes potentially a love without the physical attraction at all. In Plato's Symposium, Socrates uh, is known to have argued that Eros helps the soul recall its inherent beauty of ideals, inherent knowledge of ideals, of spiritual path. Therefore, that form of youthful beauty arouses erotic desire, but also it's what is um, pushing us to have higher spiritual ideals. Love it, love it. If we continue with that idea of what love is and we get to that Greek concept of philia, and it just means affection, friendship, and there is intrinsic in it that idea of equality. It's two individuals that feel very much equals. And usually we can say philia is in English words, close to us, that brotherly love, the love within family members, the love of members of your community. And I would say it requires a sense of familiarity, but also intrinsic in that familiarity is that it's flat, no hierarchical order. So let's now move on to storge, which means love and affection, but it's really the love between, let's say, parents and children. And in it, it's inherent idea of empathy, right? And also express tolerance, acceptance, uh, almost as if I could love my, super strict father, but there's love. It can also, interesting enough, describe love of a country or even the love of a favorite team. So there's a distance there and there's a hierarchy into who does what when. Philautia, which means self love, and loving oneself means let's take care to ensure my happiness, and it can be actually conceptualized as a basic human necessity, right? As this moral, by some moral flaw, vanity, selfishness, but it's really not. It is also, it's taking care. It's loving oneself. So that's the two sides of the equation. And finally, the last concept of love is xenia, which just means, interesting enough, that the love that is expressed by our hospitality. So it can be used when there is a friendship for our guests, or even for those more ritualized friendship. And it usually inherent in the expression of that love, there is generosity, gift exchange, and reciprocity. How about that? But let's go and ask what Joanna tells us. Well, she describes love in general terms as a form of self abnegation toward a fulfilling self-given acceptance. So she's bringing concepts of potentially agape, right, which is that charitable love, but also a self-giving attitude that could be philia, can be storge, could be philautia and xenia in how we express that. But if we think about it, this expression, this attitude, self-giving, when we are engaged in a loving relationship, we stop being suspicious of the other, right? We welcome them, and we bring create room for that relationship, and we are mature. We don't impose or even have childish demands of the other. It is an experience of welcoming the other in my own space. And when we do this, because it's self giving, we are not imposing our insecurities to the other. Therefore, we're not jealous. We don't think of the other as they belong to me. We don't have a desire, need, or ambition of controlling the other, of possessing the other. And interesting enough, we don't expect the other to even reciprocate our feelings. So maybe something akin, and I'm just joking here, but maybe akin to my love of a famous I don't know, opera singer or a famous actor or a famous writer, or even a famous political figure. On my account, I just have this extreme admiration of Nelson Mandela. Of course, he's no longer with us, but it would be something that when he was alive, me visiting them and cannot be jealous of the time that he spends with other people, for example. But just maybe a flawed example, but it is my example that comes to mind at this point. But if we continue to reflect upon those types of love and how to express, we find that regardless of what that is, love should never, ever lead to sorrow, to distress, or irritability, right? Even if the other does not feel the same way that we do. And this is important because that's a self-giving, right? We don't own. And if we think about it, when we truly love the other, we understand the underlying goal, that it's not to receive, or that it does not include demanding anything of the other. So, from this perspective, we see love as the conduit to freedom instead of the burdens of anxiety or obligations that we often see in many relationships. So let's keep moving on and see what else does Joanna de Angelis bring to us. And she brings the concept of ownership. And she's quite brilliant when she states that when the characteristics of true love are absent, love now becomes a noun masked by the conditioned memory of society around desires rather than the symbol of the real feelings that it truly represents. How about that? It is this rather disturbing relationship that Joanna wants to focus in this chapter of the book. She brings to our attention the risk of this type of connection to another when that disturbing relationship may lead to the dehumanization of one or both parties, right? Because of how we are conditioned. And from a psychological point of view, um, the process of dehumanization is one that involves perceiving or treating the other, your partner, the other person, as if they're less human than us. Therefore, they're undeserving or unworthy of our affection, our love. And Joanna brings to us this alert, if you will, that in a disturbing relationship, whatever or however long that may be, it may transform the other person, right? One of the two may transform, psychologically speaking, the other person to a possession. Um, and that relationship now becomes a possessor and a possessed item. And we can find unconscious or even conscious example of ownership in a relationship when we say or even hear phrases as my friend, my wife, my son, my companion, my partner, my money, right? So those are the things that it's intrinsic in how we see the other, even if it's not consciously done. So the friend, the wife, the son, the partner, the companion is owned, but interesting enough, he or she often does not offer resistance to that idea. And the lack of resistance is really all about I don't want to create conflicts. So if we think about it, and I'm going to quote Joan again, she says that the notion of a possessing individual and that individual that is possessed may, in the end, unravel to a situation where the affection that is represented by a sense of possession, that relationship deteriorates into a relationship of resistance, animosity, or even hatred. And I'd like to call out here that in those types of relationship, indifference is a symptom of this type of relationship, which is a result of either I'm no longer interested in you, right? I'm owned and I'm not interested in the owner in one case, but also is a symptom of the fragmentation of the entire bond between those two people. So, what may have become as remember the love arrows, it may have started with that attraction, with that passion. It devolves into a possessing type of relationship that dissolves again into indifference and a fragmentation of that relationship to begin with. But let's, if you don't mind, I would love to go ahead and talk about language. Yes, you heard me right. Joanna brings this whole sense of neurolinguistics, which is, in so many words, the study of the neural mechanism in the human brain that control the comprehension, production, and acquisition of language. And I just keep thinking, we are in a pickle, aren't we? Because Joanna brings this call to action. She invites us and she urges us, in fact, to have a new behavior. And for that, the Joanna actually recommends that depth psychology become the study of a new free language, right? So if we go further, and as we know, neurolinguistics, as I said, is that study of the new neurological mechanism, right? Psycholinguistics, or the psychology of language, is actually the study of the interrelationship between linguistics, factors, and psychological aspects. And I'm like, oh, we're getting good here. Let's keep on going. That field of study includes the study of the mechanism by which the language is actually processed and represented in my mind, in my brain. Which basically means that it studies the factors that are psychological neurobiological to enable me to acquire, use, comprehend, and produce my language. So psycholinguistics are concerned with the cognitive faculties and processes that are necessary to even produce, say, grammatical constructions in your language, native language or other ones, but they also are really interested in the perception of these constructions by the person who listens to them. So if you think about, and I'm quoting Joanna one more time, the word is a symbol. That symbol clothes an idea that in turn is the formulation of a thought. The latter becomes an accumulated memory, and the thought reemerges later when one desires to close it. Brilliant. So, if we think about it, societal memory has added concepts about love in relationships, and it has established signals that characterize them without maybe properly examining their psychological or mental structures when those symbols are removed or stripped. So, what Joanna is talking here is about the cognitive framework or the organized systems of thoughts, beliefs, and information within the mind that will help us interpret and understand the world around us. Essentially, she's talking about that cognitive framework that acts as a mental blueprint for processing information and making sense of our own experience. Let's break it down further. In so many words, it's about the network of interconnected concepts and relationships. And before we move on, um, if if we stop to pause about it, it's important for us to make a reference of symbols in psychology because just the word symbols can have multiple definitions. And real quickly, if you think about it, Jungian symbols, according to Jung, symbols are images or language that convey something hidden or unknown through a concrete reality. And they're produced by the unconscious mind, and it is done that through intuition, revelation, and can be fully understood the symbology by the conscious mind, right? He goes on to say, just because it's important perhaps for us to think about it, Jung says the symbols are compensatory and integrative. They illuminate the unconscious and they unite opposites in a form that's never consciously devised. So Jung believed that symbols are more important than signs because signs only points to something while symbols have resonance and layers of meaning to explore. For example, a heart is an internal organ, but a heart symbolizes love, connection, and even life force. Oh, that's just too cool. If we move on to Piaget, Piaget thought that the symbolic reference or representation is common whenever there is a gap between speech and action. So images are used to assimilate the content that is not there. If I now go to cognitive symbols, we reference neurolinguistics, psycholinguistics, right? From a cognitive perspective, symbols are internal signs that represent our mental content through computational state of mind. Symbols, according to cognitive framework, They are spatial, temporarily independent from their reference, and they may not even resent them. So, in so many words, symbolic thinking, or the ability to think about events and objects that aren't in the immediate environment, is key for our understanding of love and relationship. I hope I got your attention, but let's just keep moving on, because we're going to talk a little bit about this favorite, favorite subject of Joanna de Angelis, which is self discovery. From this perspective, Joanna de Angelis invites us again to a second invitation, right? To this journey of self discovery. She says, and I have it in the image that I'm presenting, human beings must commit themselves to self discovery to be happy, identifying their faults and virtues without self punishment, self judgment, or self condemnation. Joanna urges us to embark in this journey with the goal to address what? Our imperfections, with the goal to forgive every time we fail. And when we do that, we end up removing the source of inner conflicts. And I know this is easier said than done. So Joanna says that we should not feel miserable when we're going through this task of self discovery, but rather, she says, lets us understand we must make an effort to alleviate our primal instincts, and to remove their manifestation of possessive behavior and aggression that is then transferred into relationships. And I'd say, and I echo Joanna's thinking here, that the journey of self discovery should allow us to develop qualities, values, and should be able to promote a sense of balance, a sense of harmony, and a sense of well being all the time. She tells us human beings should simply renew themselves indefinitely, and this journey of self discovery is one that leads to becoming better people, better partners, better mother or child, etc. Because when we do this, we start acting with whatever attitude that we may have, but removing that sense of guilt, and we embracing ourselves with a sense that is not one that is anxious or neurotic. So I would say, instead of saying carpe diem or seize the day, right? I would like us all to seize the opportunity, right? Let's seize the opportunity without even perhaps falling for the very temporal perspective of seize the day, only the moment. Let us give ourselves to the world. Let's give ourselves to others. Let's give ourselves the ability to be, to seize this opportunity to embark in our self discovery and attain confidence and peace. Like to keep going with this thought, because Joanna ends pretty much right, this coming to an end of this chapter here, when she now merges two thought processes, which is love and gratitude. And yes, it may be said that in love, as in one identifies oneself with another, we, those who love, are simply realizing an act of expanding ourselves, right? We are now position ourselves as a member of two different people. And we are at the point in a position being able to love ourselves, but not the other. So, from this perspective, we come to understand that when we identify with someone else, this very act of identifying is based on memories, and memories can be of pleasure, of pain, of joy, or failure. And we can conclude that the memories that surface when we do this are founded on how we have enjoyed our past and all the good, meaningful moments. But is it that instead of the ability to love the other person directly as he or she is, right? And I keep thinking this is quite cool thinking that love from that perspective, it's just a love identification with myself. I could bring up several books that pop up in my mind as that one of them, which is an old movie, but um, very interesting. And I just missed the title. Um, with Tom Cruise of all that he talks about lucid dreams and that love relationship is created all from his own memory, right? And it's quite disturbing movie, by the way. But a Vanilla Sky, that's the title. But we may we may have heard actually when we think about it, someone say, "I love because." I love because I share our home, our children, our life, our struggles, or I love because he or she has been able to help me, assisted me, suffer by my side. So that the interesting here is the because, right? Because if we dissect this feeling, we see that the predominant feeling is one of gratitude. And the question here is now, well, is this bad? Is gratitude love? Or gratitude is an emotion representing a sentiment of recognition. And as such, this brand of love is one that has a integral aspect of reciprocity or even rewards. But Joanna said that love is about self-giving, and in that lies the entire paradox of this discussion here. So it is essential to all of us create this new language, right? That she calls the depth psychology, in order to break free from everything that became part of our cultural memory or societal memory, because that has so many symbols that can be even inadequate. We can talk about the heart, the cupid, right? Even clasped hands. But regardless of what the symbol itself is, if we reflect upon, they embed this confusion between the concepts of love, the concepts of gratitude, and we can see, quite frankly, how they may bring on those disturbing and potentially disastrous consequences to our relationships. Unfortunately, we human race don't have enough psychological maturity to deal with conflicts, obsessions, anxieties as part of our day-to-day routine. But Joanna gives us hope when she states that through self-knowledge we'll be able to acquire the confidence and love to replace our conflicts, and love can turn into the focal point of our happiness. So I put that in the screen. Let us not forget that love between two or more individuals will only be wholesome if they're all at the same level. I want to conclude now with the idea of relationships because the question for all of us is separation the solution to our disturbing relationships? Is moving away from another the answer? Are we even free to engage as we do that in yet another relationship when we're not ready? And most of us believe that a new relationship is the key to bring happiness. Unfortunately, the problem is not the relationship itself, but our inner psychological state. As such, and as a means of addressing the issue, only the adoption of love in all its renewing, wholesome, edifying structure can achieve the aspiration of success. We individuals will take our entire social memory with us, our behaviors, the representation of who we really are wherever we go. And we do this with whomever we meet. Therefore, let's think about it. If we transfer from one relationship to another, this in itself will not solve the problem. Instead, we must find a solution for the underlying issues within ourselves before we should consider moving on to another relationship, right? But this is, to me, a very interesting discussion. I hope it has helped you as much as it has helped me. There is different parts of an entire relationship, and I just want to say thank you for being with me. And I invite you to join me in the next chapter when we talk about achieving inner plenitude. So we're getting to a good space from this one where neurosis and the relationship are really not conducive to that sense of plenitude. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here and see you next time.